today we're going to keep going with this session here. We're talking about the company story and how to craft a compelling one. As Chris kind of set up this morning, it really all starts with, what is your company story? Who are you and how did you get there? Why are you doing what you do? And to join us today, we have two incredible speakers. Oh, here they come.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there we go. That's all right. How are you, Daina?
I'm awesome. Thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. And Priscilla, welcome as well.
Hi, how's it going?
Excellent. All right. So Priscilla Tsai, she's the founder and CEO of skincare brand Coco Kind. Coco Kind is hugely popular conscious skincare brand. Started Coco Kind in her apartment and has since scaled the company to be sold in Target and Whole Foods all over the country. And actually a unique connection, Priscilla, I know you went to college with our director of marketing, Jamie. Jamie was kind of telling me about the early days and how excited she was to have you part of this event. And so thank you for being here.
Of course. Jamie is one of my best friends. I would do anything for her. So I'm just so happy to be a part of this today.
Awesome. And then Daina Trout, the co-founder and chief mission officer. I like this. This is a different take on the CMO, the chief mission officer of Health-Ade Kombucha. So Health-Ade is the fastest growing kombucha brand in America, founded in 2012 by your husband, yourself, and a best friend who I know you met on a different job on a first day ride along. And so I'm sure we'll get into some of that founding story, and then scaled from the apartment to the farmer's market with an interesting pivot on what even the product was going to be. And I'll say we have some in the fridge at the office. We love it. So excited for you to join us today as well.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
All right. Well, first thing to start, I guess if you were just to meet anybody randomly in a coffee shop and they said, what do you do? What's your company? Like, I know I just did a little bit of setup, but what would you say that's different? How would you give somebody the one-liner pitch? And then we're going to figure out how you expand it maybe to new team members and to the broader world, internal and external comms. So Daina, would you like to start?
Sure. Usually I say, we make the best kombucha you can buy. Have you ever heard of kombucha? And then I jump into it being a health drink, fermented beverage. But I guess it depends on the audience of who's asking. It feels like if I'm talking to an entrepreneur, I'll actually talk a little bit about the company we built too. So I'm really proud of the 150 people that work for us and the culture that we built. And one of the biggest drivers of me starting Health-Ade was really to build a company I could be proud of. So I'll usually weave that in there too.
All right. Solid. And Priscilla, how about you?
So we are a conscious skincare company that is changing the status quo of the beauty industry through transparency and accessibility. That's my one-liner.
Now, I've heard you talk about that before, how like you're changing the beauty industry. Like that is a lofty goal. That's quite the chief mission.
Yeah.
I'm curious how, like, what even inspired you to grasp onto that and say, that's where we're going. Like, this is the thing that I have to do and that I have to build something to accomplish.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting question because it's changed so much through the years. I think it always goes back to every company out there. You have to focus on true value creation. And what is value creating in a really saturated industry today, which is the beauty industry. In particular, where we're playing, there's been so much innovation over the last 5 years since I've been in business. So you constantly have to ask yourself, like, what is true value creation? And when you can create that, then you can change the industry. But when I first started, not only was there no conversation about sustainability in this industry, no conversation about transparency of ingredients, of formulation, responsibility generally as a company. People told me all of our price points are under $25, and people told me that was no man's land in beauty. And so there was just every single aspect of the key pillars of our business, whether it was transparency, accessibility, inclusivity, none of that existed. Today, that's really different. And we can talk about, how we continue to evolve, what that means in terms of changing the status quo of the beauty industry. But, when I first started, none of that existed. We didn't have a playbook, we didn't have this model of D2C companies. And so really had to carve that for myself and figure it out one step at a time. But, that is what propelled me ultimately, is not only a really personal skincare story of suffering through a lot of acne and feeling really self-conscious, that being my number one insecurity. But it was actually that paired with all of those things that I felt like were missing in the industry that allowed me to actually be brave enough to start the company. If it wasn't for me really believing that we were going to change something and bring something value add, I would never have started the company.
So awesome. And Daina, I know from your story, similarly, you and your husband and friend had gotten kind of obsessed with this idea of starting something that meant something, and it like had these notebooks that you would just start to like write down all the frustrations and pain points that you were seeing every single week, and then meet in like an entrepreneurial club every Saturday, and just like break down and say like, which of these things do we want to solve? Like, what are we passionate about? And you netted out on something that turned into Health-Ade Kombucha, but wasn't Health-Ade Kombucha. I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, you had it exactly right. We knew that we would have some kind of a business if we could solve a problem. And so we came to those meetings with problems to solve. My husband, and I don't know if he'll appreciate this, but he was starting to have thinning hair. And that was the problem that he brought to the table one Saturday. And that he was only 28 years old, and shucks, this is happening too early. And so we started to research what would regrow hair, or make hair, not fall out. And we found all over, and my background's in nutrition, and I'm really into food and healing with food and cooking with food. And I'm a holistic nutritionist. So I'd learned how to make kombucha and fermented foods long before these entrepreneur meetings. But anyway, we started researching what would regrow hair, and we found that kombucha is used all over the world as the culture is used as a mask on the head. And
like the SCOBY, right? The globby thing that's in the drink that some people just don't want to drink.
Right. And actually it's not, now kombucha's made, I think, like, we've just elevated our abilities to make kombucha. Now you're not usually finding it in the drink as much, but you certainly use it in the fermentation process. So it's the culture that's essentially turning tea into kombucha. It's no different than a culture that might turn milk into kefir, or what ferments sauerkraut as well. Ferments cabbage into sauerkraut. So kombucha has its own specific culture, and that's called a SCOBY often. But anyway, it's like a pancake, and people would actually put it on their head and they experience hair growth. And it wasn't just one or two people. It was like hundreds of people we would found online. And we didn't have a lot of money to start the business, but making kombucha, if you know how to make it, it certainly isn't expensive. So if you're making it at home, that is. And I knew how to make it. As I mentioned, that was my background. So we very quickly combined these two things, the problem of thinning hair and the fact that we already knew how to make really good kombucha. And I had a special SCOBY from Tibet, made really good kombucha. And so theoretically, it would grow hair really well, right? And we started making a ton of kombucha in an effort to actually replicate these cultures so that we could use the cultures on the head and save the world from baldness. But each time we made a batch of kombucha, of course, I wasn't going to throw the liquid away because this was really good, tasty kombucha. So we bottled it up and just sort of put it aside, and we give it to my friends here and there, but certainly did not think that was the business. We thought that was sort of the byproduct that we could enjoy. The real money was in these SCOBYs. We got an opportunity a few weeks later to sell in a farmer's market. And the three of us are the kind of people that say yes before we're ready. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes that hurts us. But in this case, it was great. We said yes to a farmer's market offer. We didn't even have a hair product yet. Quickly figured out that wasn't going to happen, but only had 2 weeks. So decided to repurpose this byproduct liquid, which was actually really good, into Health-Ade Kombucha, and never really looked back. So 12 years later, we never put a SCOBY on anyone's head.
I love the story of the byproduct becoming the product and not being afraid to pivot away when you see the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, does the SCOBY also help prevent grays? Because I'm starting to see them come in. My first child is on the way, and so I need to keep the grays at bay. I'll have to look into this.
I'm not sure. We've never studied it, but I'll tell you, Justin still has a full head of hair.
All right, awesome. So Priscilla, when you set this beautifully big mission for yourself and for this company you wanted to create, at what point did you start to actually like write things down? Like, it's time to write down, these are our core values. It's time to write down, like, this is our mission. It's time to solidify where we're going. Before, like, was it before you started to scale this wide beyond you, or was it like, hey, we've got like 10 people now and we need to make sure that they know where we're doing and where we're going?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think like a year and a half ago, when I started the company, I bootstrapped, and I was on my own and had just left a job in finance. I grew up with a mom who's a small business entrepreneur, but like I said, I really had zero experience in this. If you rewind to over 6 years ago when I left my job to do this, like, I had no idea. And it was really about figuring out one small step at a time, really focused on product first, and of course our community and customers. So over time, you know, this idea of building this organization, building a purpose, the mission, vision, values, like all that stuff, which seems really basic, but honestly, when you're in it, you're just trying to like do business, and that's what you're focused on. But over time, you realize, I think every entrepreneur realizes that building an organization is so much harder than building a business. And all those things like your mission, your vision, and your values really have to be clearly established, and they take a lot of work to continuously, you know, hone in on and make sure that your team is really living and breathing those values. So for me, it took a long time. I think a lot of people do a much better job of that, but I've honestly had, you know, no experience and didn't really know what I was doing. So it took me a little bit of a journey and a lot of trial and error to get there and to frankly realize how important they were.
Building an organization is a lot harder than building a business. I love that. Everybody, write that quote down. Well said. All right. So Daina, similar story for you. Did you even think about that early on, or was it just kind of like dealing with the grind of the farmers markets and the increasing demand and just the scale of scaling?
You know, it was both, but yes, we did think about that early on. I had the benefit of, so my previous job prior to ditching that and starting Health-Ade was I was a change agent for a huge organization, an international pharmaceutical company. And my job as change agent was to improve engagement of its own employees. So usually you think about pharmaceutical companies as a company that sells to other people, right? But in this case, my job within the company was to actually serve and service its own employees. And I learned so much in this job about leadership, management, engagement, productivity, what teams excel, what teams don't. It was like a business course, or maybe even a whole business degree in people and what makes people move, what makes them do things, what inspires them. And I felt so like inspired myself by the learnings that when I finished that job, it was very clear that this wasn't something that just happens, like a good culture or a good team or a performing team. It was something you really had to work at and be deliberate about, articulate what your values are. Your values aren't just words on a page. They have to really embody the culture, and your culture has to embody the values. So we were very deliberate about it from the beginning. As a result of that experience, you know, some examples of things I still do and did from the beginning, probably much earlier than I would have had I not had the change agent experience. You know, we do like a culture interview. So that's essentially, you know, you pick somebody, of course, by their skill sets and are they going to do a good job at the job? And that's a good thing to do. What we would also do is have somebody totally unrelated to the job search. So let's say I was hiring somebody, I would have Justin interview this person, and their job in that interview is to not look at skill sets, not ask about their background. In fact, you might not even know the job that they're applying for. The point of this interview was to understand, did they embody our 4 values, which is grit, optimism, authenticity, and leadership? And we'd have all these kind of interesting questions. So of course, you don't just ask like, do you have grit? Because the person's not going to say no, right? So a better,
I don't have that. Sorry, not your person.
Right. A better question to ask that will get out of that person, are they gritty, is something like, tell me about your rock bottom worst day at work. And they'll tell you a story about their worst day, and you can just tell from the way they talk about it. Do they have optimism? Are they gritty? And so through questions like that, we were basically grading these people, these candidates, on how well did they fit the culture. And then we would only hire those that were ranking a 9 or above as we sort of calibrated it. So almost like 10 out of 10 on these values. And I think it's one of the keys to our early success because, or I guess I should say our early growth, because we didn't have a lot of turnover and like we were all rowing in the same direction. So even though I would agree with Priscilla that it is much harder to grow a business, an organization of people than it is a business, I would totally agree, because a business you can do with one person, but as soon as you involve more, and there was a moment when you cross 50 where that like now becomes, you can't do a text message with 50 people, you know? But I think if you're deliberate and you really think about it and you're in charge of that and you're proactive about the culture that you want to create and you feed that culture, you can absolutely do it. So, yeah.
Priscilla, is that, do you have any sort of similar hiring tactics as far as, ranking against culture and core values?
Yeah, we do. So, we have like a pretty built out recruiting system now of a scorecard. For us, we have a company value called We Stay Ready. And that, is just embodies like the flexibility needed and resilience needed to do this. Also grit. We are a very numbers oriented company. So, we respect numbers is literally one of our company values. And then humility is like one of our really key values as well. Because I think that humility is such a competitive advantage. And so those are like the main things that we look for. Of course, anybody who's really coming into our process is someone who's extremely values aligned with us, with how we show up in the world, using our platform for good, speaking out when we really feel like, people can benefit from us voicing an opinion about whatever social issue there is. Those are things that just come naturally to the people that are attracted to interviewing with us. But that is also like extremely important that there's alignment there.
Yeah. It's interesting. Both of you touched on this a little bit, but Daina, you said specifically there was that moment where you realized you couldn't text the entire team, right? You got to a scale of people in your organization where it was too, big, right? And I often think about that with Trainual. Like I feel like, we're almost 4 years into this. And when I look at like the history of this timeline, I feel like the first year and a half where we had less than 20 was like one piece of the business. And then it was like, since then feels like about the same amount of time, even though it's been a longer time, but it's just like the scale has increased. And those just, I feel like it's like BC and AD to me at that point of getting to a certain team size. Now, both of you have such powerful founding stories. How do you get the later team members to really feel the founding story, right? Like I think the people that were there maybe with you when it was 3, when it was 5, when it was 15, when it was even 25, right, might have a different relationship with your brand and with your company and with the mission than maybe employee number 60 or employee number 150. Like how do you, you lived every moment, you feel every moment, you remember everything, but the later team members don't. How do you find a way to communicate that? Either of you can jump in.
Priscilla, it sounded like you were taking a breath to talk. You want to go first?
Sure. I was going to say, I try to do a new employee. We try to like group them all in like one session per month, of just like the story of how we came to be, because we have a pretty incredible like story of what it was like in those beginning years when we were getting this off the ground. And I think one of the things that I really emphasized there, because we were a bootstrap company for so long, is talking about the idea that, and I know Health-Ade has these similar experiences of, I would go to stores and do demos like 5 times a week. And it would be doing the day job and then doing 3-hour demos at like a Whole Foods store and talking to like 10 customers at a time. So today we have lots of followers on Instagram. Back then we had like 4. And I was like 2 of them. And so basically every time we went to a demo, that was like the big opportunity to meet customers. And, I tell the story, I tell our employees in that new session, like just how much grit was involved in that. And they would be driving all over California. I would drive like 3 hours to do a 3-hour demo and then come back and I would talk to 10 people the whole time. And people would ask me like, where's the ground beef? It was just like this really defining experience for me in the first year and a half of the business. And it also, I think, really emphasizes the importance of like one customer. That's why like we don't take our community, we don't take our customers for granted, whether it's on CX or community or whatever it is, because literally when we talk about acquisition, we've been there acquiring one customer at a time. So I think it's about storytelling. You as a founder, you have so much experience and you've been through so much, and bringing your team along to them. They weren't there, but to feel those emotions, and people feel I know people feel extremely proud of our roots who work for Coco Kind, because they hear this and they understand that they see the actions that we take as management now, and they understand that that's rooted in, where we've been. It's really clear, how we work has always really stayed the same. And so I think it's just about being creative with storytelling and trying to do it in a really compelling, emotional way.
I love that.
Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, you're good. I was just going to kick it over to you and say, like, Daina, to reprompt the question, I know that you can probably picture, was it Mark's face, the first sale at the farmer's market, right? But nobody else can. And so how do we communicate that to the new team members?
Yeah. And I think, in the same ways that Priscilla said, we did all those things. And I think in the beginning, provided you're being authentic as a founder and involved with the consumer as a founder, your culture kind of is you in the beginning. So you go to the farmers markets every day, set up at 5 a.m., lug the stuff, do the thing, talk about your product because it's coming from your heart. I mean, in that beginning stage, culture, it's not that it's easy, but it's you. And so the hard part is, how do you translate that to others? And I think a part of it is the story for sure, but you want to be careful, at least, I found that there was a pitfall if you relied too much on the beginning story, because it's more about the values than the story. The story is a sexy beginning. It's always romantic. Everybody loves to hear that beginning. Oh, you were going to do hair loss and then you were going to do kombucha. And it's an important story to tell. But, truly to succeed in business, fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, it's not as much about the beginning. It's about how you deal with all the curveballs that come your way every day. And it may have been a cool moment when we decided to, sell kombucha in the market instead of hair loss. But what do you do when 4 million bottles don't show up at your doorstep and you've got to deliver them to Costco the next day? Like that's what business is solving those types of problems. And so, I think what's more important is the values than the story. And that's really where values come from, is how do you behave? How do you act? What are your norms? What do you stand for? I mean, I guess that's now jumping into mission, but that's the stuff that stays alive 5, 10, 15 years later. And then that beginning story becomes, the opening slide to our brand training, for example. So I do brand training to all of our new employees. I spend 2 hours with every single person that joins us, no matter what. And talk to them about our values. We talk about what those values mean. And yes, a slide in there is that beginning story so they can kind of connect to that. But I want to make sure not to overindulge in that beginning story because business evolves and it's not as simple as those beginning times. And it's important we don't forget that. Like the culture evolves too.
Is there, either of you can take this, is there a moment ever where you feel like culture, values, any of that should not be top down? Like, is there a pivot point in the business where it's not just you, right? When does it start to be informed by the broader company or customer, the market, the brand? Like, when do you see external influences start to shift the values? And then as the founder, do you like try to wrap your hands around that and say like, no, this is what we are, right? Or do you get a little more flexible and say, okay, I could see based on what you're saying that we need to do this. How have you handled that, Priscilla?
I think culture is an ecosystem. It does for sure involve your customers, at least for, a company like ours where we are not like arm's length away from our customer. We are like right there with her or him. And, that is something that it makes me really proud actually when I see a customer DM us and they'll provide some suggestion on how we do things. Or I see somebody who's new to the company respond in DMs because I'm always down in the DMs still to this day, just checking on the customer. But I'll see, some of these threads go between someone on my team and a customer. And I see the way that they respond, the way that they have a conversation. And I know that like the culture is alive in that moment. And that makes me really proud. So I definitely think it's an ecosystem if you do it right. And it should be something that you're not only, giving love, but you're receiving love too. And, you're just kind of always being fed, and feeding like the right energy to support that. So that, we definitely haven't always done that right. And it's really difficult to do, but ideally that is something that you cultivate.
It's a really good question, because I feel like chasing, like you don't want to be in a position that you're chasing what's hot or chasing what you think consumers want, because consumers can move from A to C in the flash, in the flash of light. And then you're like this chaotic, inauthentic thing that's following and not leading anything. So I'm a really big believer that you have to create, the thing that you think is valuable based on a very authentic passion you have for that as the founder, I like if people just stop drinking kombucha, I'm not just going to start making diet soda. Like, so I think you have to, at some level, stand for and believe in and have so much passion in that you're leading a pursuit. But at the same time, like Priscilla said, it is an ecosystem. And if you're not listening to your consumers, you're missing out on something really important. But, we keep talking about values, but like when you think about values, so I shared my values. I'll share them again because somebody asked about it. So grit, authenticity, optimism, and leadership. They happen to spell out GOAL, GOAL, which was not a mistake. Because our first value is to actually set extraordinary goals, really big goals that are hard to hit. Those things don't change. Like it doesn't matter if year over year, new circumstances present themselves where we might, be more interested in using organic produce, for example, or because consumers want organic, or perhaps there's civil unrest and we need to present ourselves as a company that supports these new things. It doesn't change our value of grit, optimism, authenticity, and leadership. We're still the same culture. We still sell kombucha. We still believe in gut health. We're just interacting with the consumers now in a way that's relevant and like meaningful to them. So I think it's important that you don't chase, because I see a lot of businesses chase and then they're kind of nothing and consumers can sniff it out. You got to be authentic too. And I think that starts with the founder in the beginning.
Yeah, I love that point. That's really important. I think it is important to listen, but still lead, right? And
Mhm.
Priscilla, I love that that you still jump into the DMs and everything. I do the same thing, nights and weekends. Like we've got a marketing team of 10, but I still just get in there and like want to see what people are saying in the comments, want to see what people are asking in the DMs. And that does inform. You got to listen. Now, Priscilla, I know you have run a billboard campaign. You had customers submit selfies. Can you talk a little bit about that campaign and just kind of how this passion about like your customer influences your company story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everything we do is for providing, again, deepening the value creation curve. And that means we have to us, like we take listening to our customer like extremely seriously. And that also means making sure she feels represented in our marketing. And that is an opportunity that I felt like we could do in a really authentic way. That wasn't, we're not a celebrity based brand. We're not a Photoshop type of brand. We're a brand that celebrates people, and we do it in a way that like empowers consumers. And so the campaign was basically, let's put you on a billboard instead of like a celebrity. That's not who we are. We are you. And that was an opportunity for us to really just, I think on one hand, exhibit our value of like empowering people in their skin, but also just to give back to the customer too. And that is something just from my own story. Like I wish I could have seen images like the images that we put out 10, 15 years ago. If I had that, I wouldn't have felt like my skin was the largest insecurity. And that is something that I just know so many of our customers resonate with. So really special opportunity. I think we are, one like the first beauty company to do something like that in a big way. And I know that it was like just truly aligned with our brand.
I don't know if either of you had a chance to tune in beforehand when we were interviewing Gary, but I know Gary Vee's one of his strong POVs is that brand is the single differentiator for your company, the single most important differentiator. And of course, the like skincare and kombucha markets are full of competitors. How do you feel like your story influences your brand, influences how you stand out in the marketplace, and then how you scale?
I can start, Priscilla, if that's good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it all roads lead to brand. So, if you're going to focus on how you started and how you make it, fine. If you're going to focus on what you value and what you stand for, fine. One thing I'll say is it is hard enough to get one message across to consumers, and everybody's got to be singing it across the company, every single chance they get, whether it's at a farmer's market, at the exchange of a bottle, or your delivery driver that's dropping off the bottles, even to a Whole Foods, stock person that might not actually be your consumer, but they're in the ecosystem. Customer service, even employees to employees. It's like, it's got to bleed. That's the toughest thing about building a company of people that actually like are organized and work together as one, is they've all got to bleed these values, and also what you're striving for, what your goals are. So I guess all this to say is whatever it is, that you're trying to do, you got to be sure you know what that is. And as the founder, you've defined it, and that it's not too many things. You're not trying to stand for this and that and this and that and this and that and 10 different things, and then you implode under the weight of too many messages. I think one of the biggest moments we had was when we focused our messaging. This was when we only had kombucha, but we had a one-liner. We make the best tasting and highest quality kombucha you can buy. And I don't even think that's what I would say today, because today I'm much more interested and intrigued by our mission. But then it was perfect because people didn't know what kombucha was, or maybe they knew a little bit, or maybe they tried it and didn't like it. And like just that message was all we said. Every single interaction, it was like, best tasting, highest quality kombucha you can buy. Best tasting, highest quality kombucha you can buy. And I know that's maybe not answering your question perfectly about brand, because everything about our brand had to be the best. We had to be the most premium, the best taste. Like we had to look like the best tasting, look like the most high quality. Everything had to say that, even not just in words. And I think that's my point, is whatever it is, everything's got to sing that thing for it to land. Does that make sense?
Totally. Absolutely,
Yeah.
guys. Priscilla, you want to take a stab at this one too?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. When I started the business, and we launched over 5 years ago, like I said, the industry was really different. And to speak to the point about evolving and the need to evolve, sometimes you have to evolve your brand positioning in order to stay innovative and to again, going back to like creating value. So when we first started, there was nobody was talking about sustainability. Nobody was talking about clean transparency of formulas, et cetera. Today, everybody's talking about that. Every single brand, like I don't even know why you would exist and think about launching unless you're thinking about sustainability or your integrity of your formulas. And so what we used to say back in the day, clean, conscious, accessible. Today, there's plenty of brands doing that. It's really important to understand that too, and not to be stubborn about that. We have to look at the world and be like, okay, like what we said back then, what was differentiating about a brand, and it truly was a differentiator at that time. Today is not a differentiator. That doesn't mean that you have to like change your values on your product offering, but it does mean that you have to think harder and figure out, going back to that authenticity, what can you provide out there that is better than any other brand in the world because it's something that you really believe in. To us, that is the transparency and authenticity of who we are. So, you know, that transparency is a big word, but that comes through in everything we do. You know, it's on our box. We literally break down our formulas with percentages on our box. We have our carbon label on our box. We provide breakdown of pricing on social media of our products. Like these are things that if you were to talk to any customer, any employee, it would be like, what is Coco Kind? Oh, wow. Like they do transparency really well. I saw this one post that they did, and I had never seen this topic brought forth, you know, in publicly. Those are the types of things that, you know, I think, because you can't make that up. You can't like all of a sudden become a transparent company. It has to be like in your roots because you're so proud of the way you do things internally, externally, et cetera. And so that is something that, you know, we've really created as a core pillar for us, but that has truly evolved over time. We've always been transparent, but like the messaging of like who we are, that conversation has definitely changed.
It's fantastic. The world craves it right now. We all need transparency. It's what we want. So really appreciate your mission and the fact that you are embodying that. I would be remiss if I didn't get 2 quick questions in. I know we're like right at the end of our time, but Priscilla, real quick. Jamie has told me that your mom is just a badass business owner. I'm sure she set some amazing examples for you growing up as a small business owner. What is one thing that you learned from your mom that you've applied to Coco Kind?
I think like you don't know what you don't know. Again, it goes back to humility. I was raised from immigrant parents. I think that's like really embodied in how I choose to work. But both of them really emphasize humility. And again, it's a company value as far as we believe it's an advantage. We believe in a learning culture and being able to understand what you don't know. So, you know, I think that's one of my biggest takeaways.
Awesome. And Daina, I think there's some real curiosity in the conversation. You said the moment, of business success is not necessarily starting, but it was figuring out how to deliver 4 million cases of kombucha to Costco. How did it happen? How'd you pull it off?
So that happened 2 weeks ago. We didn't pull it off. And there's a major shipping container global crisis right now, and we just couldn't get 4 million of our bottles from Thailand, where some of them are made, to the US. And it's good for business in the end because we're going to, shake hands with a domestic supplier. And that's better anyway, I think. But it takes things like that to get there. And I think but sometimes the wins aren't always when you cross the finish line with a gold medal. Watching how my team operated with the very difficult information of, okay, this didn't show up. How are we going to handle it? The goal became, let's maintain a really strong relationship with Costco because that's a huge part of our business, right? And they did. And it was like really cool to watch in the problem moments, how the team communicated with each other, communicated with our customers, how we adjusted our plan as a result, it touched every part of our business, right? Because you can imagine that big of a curveball is going to impact how much you spend in marketing or something like that, And it was very, very awesome to see how all the pieces communicated, handled the problem. And while we didn't get the 4 million bottles when we needed them, and we had to pull from that Costco big promotion, totally sucks. We're going to survive. And we still maintain a great relationship with Costco, and it's going to happen in January. It's not the end of the world. But it could have been the end of the world if we weren't focused on, this isn't going to take us down. This isn't a dead end.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Sorry, I didn't have the rainbows and butterflies.
Honestly, that's even better. Like that's the transparency and authenticity we've been talking about. That's the sometimes you don't make it happen, but you lean into relationships and resourcefulness and keeping it real, as Joe just said. Yes. Well, thank you, Daina. Thank you, Priscilla, so much for joining us here at Playbook 2021.